I gave my son a piece of my own body so he could live. I never imagined he would be the one to throw me out of his life just 2 years later. Those words still burn inside my chest like hot coals pressed against my heart. Even now, as I sit here with trembling hands and tears that have carved permanent rivers down my weathered cheeks, I cannot fully comprehend how my story became this tragedy. How the child I carried beneath my heart for 9 months, the baby I nursed through countless sleepless nights, the boy I raised with every ounce of love a mother could possibly possess, became the very person who would cast me out into the cold like I was nothing more than garbage to be disposed of. My name is Grace Thompson. I am 60 years old. And this is the story of how my own flesh and blood destroyed me. I want you to understand something before I continue. I am not telling you this story for pity. I am not seeking vengeance or hoping that somehow my words will wound my son the way his actions have wounded me. No. I am telling you this story because somewhere out there, perhaps in a small apartment in Manchester or a suburban home in Ohio, there is another mother sitting alone, wondering if she did something wrong. There is another father wiping tears from his eyes in the darkness, questioning where his sacrifices went astray. And I need them to know they are not alone. I need them to understand that sometimes, despite everything we give, despite the very organs we tear from our own bodies to keep our children alive, love does not guarantee love in return. That is the cruelest lesson life has ever taught me. Let me tell you about myself, so you can see me clearly as I tell this story. I am not the woman I once was. The kidney donation took something from me that can never be replaced, and I do not simply mean the physical organ that now resides inside my son's body, keeping him alive while I slowly deteriorate. I mean something deeper. Something essential to who I was. At 60, my body has become a map of suffering. Deep lines cross my face like cracks in ancient pottery, each one telling its own story of sleepless nights spent worrying about my son's health, about bills we could not pay, about a future that always seemed uncertain. My hair, once a rich chestnut brown that Michael used to run his fingers through on lazy Sunday mornings, has turned to silver and gray, thinning at the temples where stress has taken its toll. My hands shake now. They shake when I try to hold a cup of tea. They shake when I reach for my husband's hand in the darkness. They shake when I remember the face of my son as he told me to leave. My health has never recovered from the surgery. The doctors warned me that donating a kidney at my age carried risks. They explained that my remaining kidney would have to work harder, that I would need to be careful for the rest of my life, that complications could arise. I told them I understood. I told them I did not care. My son was dying. What mother would not give every piece of herself to save her child? But now, 2 years later, I feel the consequences of that choice every single day. There is a constant ache in my side where the scar runs like a pale railroad track across my flesh. My energy drains quickly, like water through a cracked vessel. Some days, I struggle to walk more than a few steps without needing to rest. My body has become a cage of exhaustion and pain. And yet, despite everything my son has done to me, my heart still beats with love for him. That is the tragedy of motherhood. We cannot simply stop loving our children, even when they give us every reason to do so. My husband Michael sits beside me now, his weathered hand holding mine. He is also 60, though the past 2 years have aged him far beyond his years. Michael was once a strong man. He worked construction for 35 years, building houses for other families while we struggled to maintain our own. His shoulders were broad, his grip firm, his presence reassuring in ways I could never fully express. When I was afraid, Michael was my shelter. When I was weak, Michael was my strength. But watching me suffer has broken something inside him. I see it in his eyes, in the way he looks at me with a sorrow so profound it takes my breath away. He blames himself for not being able to protect me from our own son. He blames himself for not seeing the change coming, for not stopping it somehow. The stress has weakened him. His hands, once capable of lifting heavy beams, now tremble almost as much as mine. His heart, the doctors have told us, is not what it used to be. The stress is killing him slowly, and there is nothing I can do but watch the man I love crumble before my eyes. Michael loves me more than I could ever deserve. In all our years of marriage, he has never once raised his voice to me in anger. He has never made me feel small or insignificant. When I made the decision to donate my kidney, he held me in his arms and told me he was proud of me. He told me I was the bravest woman he had ever known. He told me that our son was lucky to have a mother like me. Neither of us knew then how wrong we were. To understand my pain, you must first understand my joy. You must see the beginning before you can truly comprehend the ending. So let me take you back to when my son was nothing more than a flutter in my belly, a promise of life growing inside me. I was 23 years old when I discovered I was pregnant. Michael and I had been married for just over a year, living in a tiny apartment with peeling wallpaper and drafty windows. We did not have much, but we had each other, and when I saw those 2 pink lines appear on the pregnancy test, I felt as though the entire universe had opened up before me. I was going to be a mother. After years of dreaming about holding my own child, feeling the weight of new life in my arms, my dream was finally coming true. The pregnancy was not easy. I suffered from terrible morning sickness that lasted well into my 2nd trimester. There were days when I could barely lift my head from the pillow, days when the mere smell of cooking food would send me rushing to the bathroom. Michael worked double shifts to cover the medical bills, coming home exhausted but always finding the strength to rub my swollen feet and tell me how beautiful I looked. I did not feel beautiful. I felt enormous and uncomfortable and terrified. But I also felt something I had never experienced before. A love so overwhelming it brought tears to my eyes. A connection to the life growing inside me that defied all explanation. I would lie awake at night with my hands on my belly, feeling my baby kick, and I would whisper promises to him. I promised to always protect him. I promised to love him unconditionally. I promised that no matter what happened, I would always be there for him. I kept those promises. Every single one of them. Even when he broke me into a million pieces, I kept those promises. The day my son was born remains the most beautiful day of my life. It was a Tuesday in April, and the rain was falling softly against the hospital windows as I pushed him into the world. The pain was unlike anything I had ever experienced, but when I heard his first cry, when the doctor placed him on my chest and I looked down at his tiny, scrunched-up face, every moment of suffering disappeared. In that instant, I understood what it meant to love something more than yourself. I understood what it meant to hold your entire world in your arms. We named him Daniel. Daniel James Thompson. Michael chose the name because it meant, God is my judge, and in those early days, holding our son felt like receiving a gift directly from heaven. Daniel had my brown eyes and Michael's strong chin. He was perfect. Absolutely perfect. Raising Daniel was the hardest and most rewarding thing I have ever done. Money was always tight. There were months when Michael and I went without new clothes so Daniel could have warm winter coats. There were nights when we ate plain rice for dinner so Daniel could have the nutritious meals growing children need. We sacrificed everything for him, and we did so gladly, because that is what parents do. That is what love demands. I remember Daniel's first steps. He was 11 months old, and we were in the living room of our small home. Michael was sitting on the floor with his arms outstretched, and I was holding Daniel upright, watching his chubby legs wobble beneath him. And then, suddenly, he let go of my hands and took 3 unsteady steps toward his father before collapsing into Michael's arms. The joy on Daniel's face was radiant. He looked up at us with such triumph, such pure happiness, and Michael and I both burst into tears. Happy tears. The kind of tears that come when your heart is so full it overflows. I remember reading to him every night before bed. Daniel loved stories about adventures in faraway lands, about brave knights and magical creatures. He would curl up against me, his small body warm and trusting, and listen with wide eyes as I brought the stories to life with different voices and dramatic pauses. And every night, without fail, before he drifted off to sleep, he would wrap his little arms around my neck and whisper, "I love you, Mommy." Those 3 words. I love you, Mommy. They were everything to me. They were the reason I got up every morning, the reason I pushed through every difficulty, the reason I gave and gave and gave until there was nothing left to give. I remember his school days, walking him to the bus stop every morning with his little backpack bouncing against his shoulders. I remember the artwork he brought home, stick figure drawings of our family that I treasured like priceless masterpieces. I remember the parent-teacher conferences where his teachers praised his intelligence and his kind heart. I remember the football games and the school plays and the birthday parties. I remember all of it, every precious moment, because those memories were supposed to be the foundation of a lifetime of love. They were supposed to mean something. As Daniel grew into a young man, I continued to pour everything I had into him. When he struggled in school, I hired tutors even though we could not afford them. When he wanted to go to university, Michael and I took out loans and worked extra hours to make it possible. When he fell in love with a girl named Victoria and announced he wanted to marry her, we welcomed her into our family with open arms, even though something about her cold smile made me uneasy. But I ignored that feeling. I ignored the way Victoria looked at our modest home with barely concealed disdain. I ignored the way she spoke to Daniel, always whispering in his ear, always pulling him away from us. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was simply struggling to let go of my little boy. I told myself that Victoria would grow to love us the way we loved her. I was wrong. Then came the day that changed everything. The day that would ultimately lead to my destruction. Daniel was 32 years old. He had been married to Victoria for 4 years, and though our relationship had become strained, I still saw him regularly. I still believed that the bond between a mother and her child could never truly be broken. And then, one ordinary afternoon in October, my phone rang. It was Victoria. Her voice was different than usual, stripped of its usual cold indifference. She sounded frightened. She told me that Daniel had collapsed at work. She told me they were at the hospital. She told me to come quickly. I do not remember the drive to the hospital. I do not remember how I got there or what traffic lights I ran or how many times I nearly crashed the car. All I remember is the terror that gripped my heart, the desperate prayer on my lips, the overwhelming fear that I was about to lose my son. When I arrived, the doctors took us into a small room with cold fluorescent lighting and chairs that seemed designed to break your spirit. They explained that Daniel's kidneys were failing. Both of them. Rapidly and without warning. They said he would need a transplant, and soon. Without one, he would die. I did not hesitate. Not for a single moment. Before the doctor had even finished speaking, I was volunteering. I was offering my kidney. I was promising that I would give whatever piece of myself was necessary to keep my son alive. Michael grabbed my hand. His face was pale, his eyes filled with fear. Not fear for Daniel, though of course he was terrified for our son. Fear for me. He knew what this surgery could do to me at my age. He knew the risks. He tried to tell me to slow down, to consider other options, to think about my own health. But I refused to listen. How could I? My child was dying. The baby I had carried in my body, the little boy who had taken his first steps toward his father, the young man who had once whispered, "I love you, Mommy," every single night, he was dying. And I had the power to save him. There was never really a choice at all. The weeks before the surgery were a blur of medical tests and consultations and sleepless nights. The doctors confirmed that I was a suitable match, though they continued to warn me about the risks. I was 58 years old. My blood pressure was slightly elevated. Recovery would be difficult. There could be complications. I signed every consent form they put in front of me. I answered every question. I submitted to every test. And through it all, I kept my eyes fixed on Daniel, lying pale and weak in his hospital bed, and I told myself that nothing else mattered. Nothing else would ever matter as much as saving my son. The morning of the surgery, Michael held me for a long time. He did not want to let me go. His arms wrapped around me so tightly I could barely breathe, and I felt his tears falling against my neck. He whispered that he loved me. He whispered that he was scared. He whispered that he could not lose me. I pulled back and looked into his eyes. I told him that I would be fine. I told him that we would get through this together, just like we had gotten through everything else. I told him that when Daniel recovered, our family would be stronger than ever. I believed every word I said. The surgery lasted hours. I do not remember much of it, only the harsh lights of the operating room, the mask being placed over my face, the slow descent into darkness. When I woke up, the pain was extraordinary. It radiated from my side like fire, spreading through my entire body with every breath. But through the haze of medication and agony, I managed to ask about Daniel. He was alive. The surgery had been successful. My kidney was inside him now, doing the work that his own organs could no longer do. I had saved him. My son was going to live. I wept with relief. Michael held my hand and wept with me. The nurses smiled and told me I was incredibly brave. Victoria came to my bedside and thanked me, though her eyes remained as cold as ever. And Daniel, still weak from his own surgery, was wheeled into my room so we could see each other. That moment. That single moment. It was the last time I truly felt connected to my son. He reached out and took my hand, his grip so weak it was barely there, and he looked at me with tears streaming down his face. "Thank you, Mom," he whispered. "You saved my life." I smiled at him through my own tears. I would do it again, I told him. 1,000 times. You are my son. You are my everything. He nodded, and for just a moment, I saw my little boy again. The child who had loved me unconditionally. The boy who had trusted me completely. The son who had been the center of my world for 32 years. I should have held on to that moment longer. I should have memorized every detail of his face, every nuance of his expression, every shade of gratitude in his eyes. Because that version of Daniel would soon disappear forever, and in his place would emerge a stranger who would shatter my heart into pieces so small I would never be able to put them back together. The recovery was brutal. I spent weeks in the hospital, then months at home, struggling to regain my strength. My body had been through trauma, and at my age, healing did not come easily. There were days when I could not get out of bed. There were nights when the pain was so intense I thought I might die. Michael cared for me constantly, helping me bathe, preparing my meals, holding me when the darkness became too heavy to bear alone. And through it all, Daniel visited less and less. At first, I made excuses for him. He was recovering too, I told myself. He had his own struggles. He would come more often once he felt stronger. But as the weeks turned into months, the visits became increasingly rare. When he did come, he seemed distracted, impatient, eager to leave. Victoria was always with him, her presence cold and oppressive, her eyes constantly checking the time. I tried to ignore the change. I tried to convince myself that everything would return to normal once we were both fully healed. But deep inside, a tiny seed of fear had taken root. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. The transformation happened slowly, so gradually that I did not recognize it until it was too late. Daniel began making comments about our home, subtle criticisms that stung more than he knew. He would look around at our modest living room and sigh, as though the sight of our worn furniture caused him physical pain. He would mention how Victoria's parents lived in a beautiful house, how their lives were so much easier, how they never had to struggle the way we did. I bit my tongue. I told myself he did not mean it. I reminded myself of all the sacrifices Michael and I had made for him, and I assumed he remembered them too. But he did not remember. Or perhaps he simply did not care. The disrespect grew. Daniel would interrupt me when I spoke, talking over me as though my words were meaningless. He would roll his eyes at my opinions, dismiss my concerns, treat me with an impatience that cut like a knife. When I tried to talk to him about it, when I gently suggested that perhaps he was not himself, he would become defensive and cold, accusing me of being overbearing, of not giving him space, of trying to control his life. Victoria encouraged this behavior. I know she did. I could see it in the smug satisfaction on her face whenever Daniel spoke harshly to me. I could hear it in the way she whispered to him, always pulling him aside, always isolating him from the parents who had given him everything. I tried to talk to Michael about it, late at night when we lay in bed together, the darkness pressing in around us. He had noticed it too. He had seen the change in our son, the gradual erosion of the respect and love we had built over 30 years. But neither of us knew what to do. How do you confront your own child about treating you poorly? How do you explain that the sacrifices you made, including the literal organ you gave, entitle you to at least basic kindness? We should have said something sooner. We should have drawn boundaries. We should have protected ourselves. But we were parents, and we loved our son, and we kept hoping that the Daniel we knew was still somewhere inside the cold stranger he had become. Then came the financial troubles. Daniel and Victoria had been living beyond their means, spending money they did not have on luxuries they could not afford. Their debts had grown massive, and suddenly they were facing the very real possibility of losing their home. Daniel came to us, asking for help. We gave him everything we had. We emptied our savings account. We took out a second mortgage on our home. We gave and gave and gave, because that is what we had always done. But it was not enough. It was never enough. The more we gave, the more Daniel expected. And when we finally had nothing left to offer, when we told him that we simply could not give any more, his attitude toward us shifted from cool indifference to open hostility. He stopped calling. Stopped visiting. When we tried to reach out, he would ignore our messages or respond with curt, dismissive texts. Victoria blocked us on social media. The doors that had once been open to us were now firmly closed, and no matter how hard we knocked, no one would answer. I should have seen it coming. Looking back now, all the signs were there. The distance. The disrespect. The gradual erasure of everything we had shared. But I could not believe it. I refused to believe that my son, the child I had sacrificed everything for, the man who carried a piece of my own body inside him, could ever truly abandon me. And then came the night that broke me forever. It was a Thursday evening in November. The air was cold, carrying the first whispers of winter. Michael and I had driven to Daniel's house to try one final time to reconnect with him. We had not seen him in months. My health had deteriorated significantly, and the doctors had warned me that the stress was taking a dangerous toll on my remaining kidney. I needed peace. I needed resolution. I needed to look my son in the eyes and understand what had gone wrong. We knocked on the door, and after a long moment, Daniel answered. He did not invite us inside. He stood in the doorway, blocking the entrance, his face a mask of cold hostility. Victoria hovered behind him, her arms crossed, her lips curved into a smirk that made my blood run cold. What do you want? Daniel asked. His voice held no warmth, no recognition of who we were or what we had been to him. I stepped forward, my voice trembling. Daniel, please. We need to talk. We're your parents. We love you. Whatever has happened between us, surely we can work it out. He shook his head slowly. There's nothing to work out. I've made my decision. What decision? Michael asked, his voice heavy with confusion and fear. Daniel's eyes swept over us with contempt. You need to stop coming here. You need to stop calling. You need to stop being part of my life. The words hit me like physical blows. I staggered backward, and Michael caught my arm to steady me. What are you saying? I whispered. I'm your mother. I gave you my kidney. I gave you everything. For a moment, something flickered in Daniel's eyes. A shadow of doubt, perhaps. A ghost of the boy he used to be. But then Victoria whispered something in his ear, and the coldness returned. I didn't ask you to do that, he said. That was your choice. You can't hold it over my head forever. Hold it over your head. I could not believe what I was hearing. Daniel, I saved your life. I gave you a piece of my own body. How can you speak to me this way? He laughed. It was a cruel sound, devoid of any humor or warmth. You always have to make everything about you, don't you? Poor mom, always the victim. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of you. I felt the world spinning around me. My hand went instinctively to my side, where the surgical scar burned beneath my coat. Please, I begged. Please don't do this. I'm your mother. I love you more than anything in this world. But Daniel was already stepping back, already closing the door. I want you out of my life, he said. Don't come back. The door slammed shut. The lock clicked into place. And then there was silence. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the closed door that separated me from my son. The cold wind whipped around me, cutting through my coat, chilling me to the bone. But the cold outside was nothing compared to the ice that had formed around my heart. And then I collapsed. My legs simply gave out beneath me. I crumpled to the ground, and Michael was there, catching me, holding me, his own tears falling onto my face as he tried to lift me up. But I could not move. I could not breathe. The pain in my chest was so intense I thought I was dying. Michael managed to get me to my feet, half carrying me down the driveway toward our car. I kept looking back at the house, at the warm light glowing in the windows, at the life that was happening inside without us. My son was in there. My only child. And he had just thrown me away like I was nothing. We did not make it to the car. My legs gave out again, and we ended up sitting on a bench at the end of the street, the cold seeping through our clothes, the darkness pressing in around us. I was sobbing uncontrollably, my entire body shaking with grief. Michael held me, his strong arms wrapped around me, but even he could not protect me from this pain. No one could. Why? I kept asking, over and over again. Why would he do this? What did we do wrong? Michael had no answers. He could only hold me tighter and let his own tears fall. The night stretched on, endless and cruel. We had nowhere to go. Our home, the house we had mortgaged to help our ungrateful son, was no longer ours. The bank had taken it 3 months earlier, and we had been living with Daniel, dependent on the generosity of the child who now wanted nothing to do with us. We had trusted him. We had believed that our sacrifice would be honored, that our love would be returned. We were fools. The cold bit into my skin, and I felt the scar on my side throb with renewed intensity. My remaining kidney ached, protesting against the stress and the cold and the overwhelming grief. I knew I needed to get warm, needed to rest, needed medical attention. But where could we go? Who would take in 2 homeless 60-year-olds with nothing but the clothes on their backs? We walked. Slowly, painfully, we walked through the streets of the neighborhood where our son lived, past houses with warm lights glowing in the windows, past families gathered around dinner tables, past lives that continued uninterrupted while ours fell apart. Each step was agony. My body was failing me, and my heart was already broken beyond repair. I thought about Daniel as a baby. I thought about the first time I held him, the warmth of his tiny body against mine, the way his eyes had locked onto my face as though I was the most important person in the world. I thought about his first words, "Mama," spoken with such joy. I thought about all the bedtime stories, all the scraped knees I had kissed better, all the tears I had wiped away. Where had that child gone? How had he become this stranger who could close the door in his mother's face without a second thought? We found a bench in a small park and sat down, huddling together for warmth. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and I could see my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Michael tried to shield me from the wind with his body, but it was not enough. The cold was everywhere, seeping into my bones, wrapping around my heart. I looked up at the sky and saw stars glittering coldly above us. Once, when Daniel was a little boy, we had lain on a blanket in our backyard and counted stars together. He had asked me if I would always be there for him, and I had promised that I would. No matter what happened, I had said, I would always love him and always protect him. I had kept my promise. Every single day of my life, I had kept my promise. But he had not kept his. The hours passed slowly, each minute dragging by like an eternity. My body was shutting down. I could feel it. The exhaustion, the cold, the stress of what had happened, it was all too much for my damaged system to handle. My vision blurred, and I felt a strange floating sensation, as though I were disconnecting from my own body. Grace? Michael's voice was distant, frightened. Grace, look at me. Stay with me. I tried to focus on his face, on the deep lines of worry carved into his features, on the love that still shone in his eyes despite everything. He was my anchor, my rock, my partner of nearly 40 years. And I was losing him. Slowly but surely, I was slipping away. I never thought my son, I whispered, the words coming out fragmented and weak, my own child, would do this to us. Michael pulled me closer, his arms trembling. I know, sweetheart. I know. I gave him everything. I gave him my kidney. I gave him my heart. And he threw it all away. You did nothing wrong, Michael told me fiercely. This is not your fault. None of this is your fault. But the guilt was there, lurking in the shadows of my mind. Had I failed him somehow? Had I not loved him enough? Had I done something, anything, that could have prevented this outcome? These questions tormented me, circling endlessly through my exhausted brain. The morning came eventually, as mornings always do. Pale light crept across the sky, chasing away the darkness but bringing no warmth. I was still alive, though barely. Every part of me ached with a depth I had never known possible. My kidney screamed in protest. My heart was a hollow shell. A woman approached us. She wore a fluorescent jacket and carried a thermos. A volunteer, I realized dimly, someone who helped people living on the streets. She offered us hot coffee and asked if we were okay, and the kindness in her voice made me weep all over again. This stranger showed us more compassion in that moment than our own son had shown in 2 years. She helped us to a shelter, a building with worn walls and uncomfortable beds but blessed warmth. They gave us blankets and food, checked my vital signs and urged me to see a doctor. I nodded numbly, too broken to resist. In the days that followed, I moved through the world like a ghost. The shelter workers were kind, but I could not shake the fog that had descended over me. Every morning I woke up hoping it had all been a nightmare, and every morning reality crashed back down upon me. My son had abandoned me. My son, whose life I had saved with my own organ, wanted nothing to do with me. How does a mother survive such a betrayal? How does she find the strength to keep breathing, keep moving, keep existing in a world that has proven itself so unbearably cruel? I do not know the answer to these questions. Perhaps there is no answer. Perhaps some wounds are simply too deep to ever heal. Michael stayed by my side through all of it. He never left me, never wavered, never gave up hope that somehow things would get better. His love was the only thing keeping me alive. When I could not eat, he encouraged me. When I could not sleep, he held me through the long, dark hours. When I wanted to give up entirely, he reminded me that I still had something to live for. I still had him. But I could see what this was doing to him. The stress was taking a terrible toll on his health. His face grew gaunt, his hair turned whiter, his strong body weakened day by day. I was watching my husband die slowly, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. We had given everything to our son. Our money. Our home. My kidney. And in return, we had been cast out into the cold to suffer alone. The weeks turned into months. We found a small apartment, a cramped and drafty place that was all we could afford with the meager income we were able to scrape together. I spent my days staring out the window, watching the world go by, thinking about the life I had once had. Thinking about the son I had once loved. I still loved him. That was the cruelest joke of all. Despite everything he had done, despite the way he had shattered my heart and destroyed my life, I still loved Daniel. Mothers do not stop loving their children. It is not possible. It is not even conceivable. The love is woven too deeply into our being to ever be extracted. I heard news of him occasionally. Through friends, through old neighbors, through the cruel whispers of fate. He was doing well, they said. He had recovered fully from his transplant. He was healthy and thriving, living in his comfortable home with his cold-eyed wife. The kidney I had given him was working perfectly, keeping him alive while I slowly faded away. That was the irony that cut deepest. My sacrifice had worked. My son was alive and healthy because of what I had given him. And yet he could not spare even a phone call for the mother who had saved his life. My health continued to decline. The doctors warned me that my remaining kidney was under too much stress, that I needed to rest, that I needed to eliminate the sources of anxiety in my life. But how could I rest when my son had abandoned me? How could I eliminate stress when every moment of every day was filled with the agony of his betrayal? One evening, as the winter shadows lengthened and the cold crept through the thin walls of our apartment, I felt something shift inside me. A dizziness that was different from before, more profound, more final. The room began to spin, and I heard Michael's voice calling my name from very far away. I collapsed onto the floor, my hand pressed against the scar on my side. The pain was overwhelming now, radiating through my entire body. Michael was beside me in an instant, holding me, crying, begging me to stay with him. Grace. Grace, look at me. Don't leave me. Please, don't leave me. But I was so tired. So impossibly tired. 60 years of living, of loving, of sacrificing, of giving everything I had to a child who ultimately rejected me. How much more could one person possibly bear? Michael called for help. The ambulance came. Paramedics worked on me, their faces tight with concentration, their voices professional and calm. I watched them through a haze, feeling strangely detached from my own body. I thought about Daniel. Even then, even as my life hung in the balance, I thought about my son. I wondered if he would come to my bedside if he knew I was dying. I wondered if he would hold my hand and tell me he was sorry. I wondered if somewhere, deep inside the cold stranger he had become, there was still a part of him that loved me. But he did not come. Of course he did not. The man I had raised, the man whose life I had saved, would not even answer his phone when Michael tried to call. They saved my life, the doctors. Barely. My kidney had nearly failed, pushed to its limits by stress and grief. They told me I needed to be very careful from now on. They told me that another episode like this could be fatal. They told me to reduce stress and avoid emotional turmoil. I almost laughed. How could I avoid emotional turmoil when my own child had thrown me away like garbage? The recovery was slow and painful. Michael cared for me with a devotion that brought tears to my eyes. He was my nurse, my companion, my reason for living. Without him, I would have given up long ago. But even with his love, the wound left by Daniel's betrayal would never fully heal. It was a permanent scar on my heart, deeper and more painful than the physical scar on my side. I am still here. Still breathing. Still living each day as best I can. But I am not the woman I used to be. The mother who believed so completely in the power of love, who trusted that sacrifice would be honored and devotion rewarded, she died that night when Daniel closed the door in my face. What remains is a shell, a shadow, a woman who has learned the cruelest lesson life has to offer. Sometimes love is not enough. Sometimes the children we raise, the babies we nurture, the sons and daughters we would die for, they become strangers who hurt us more deeply than any enemy ever could. I do not hate my son. I wish I could. Hatred would be easier than this constant, aching love that refuses to die. But mothers are not built for hatred. We are built for sacrifice, for devotion, for endless giving even when nothing comes back in return. If Daniel came to my door tomorrow, I would open it. If he called me on the phone, I would answer. If he told me he was sorry and asked for my forgiveness, I would give it without hesitation. That is the curse of motherhood. We cannot stop loving. We cannot stop forgiving. We cannot stop hoping that one day, our children will remember what we meant to them. But I no longer expect it. I no longer wait by the phone, hoping for a call that will never come. I have made my peace with the reality of my situation, as much as such peace is possible. My son is alive because of me. Every beat of his heart, every breath he takes, is made possible by the organ I willingly surrendered to save him. He carries a piece of me inside him, whether he acknowledges it or not. And nothing he does, no amount of rejection or cruelty, can erase that fundamental truth. I am his mother. I saved his life. And despite everything, I love him still. To any mother reading these words, to any father who has been cast aside by the child they devoted their life to, I want you to know that you are not alone. The pain you feel is real. The wound is deep. The betrayal is almost too much to bear. But you are not defined by your child's actions. You are not diminished by their rejection. The love you gave, the sacrifices you made, they were not worthless simply because they were not honored. You did your best. You gave everything you had. And even if your child never understands, even if they never appreciate what you did for them, you can hold your head high knowing that you loved with your whole heart. That is the only thing any of us can do. Love fully. Give completely. And when the world breaks our hearts, find the strength to keep breathing, keep living, keep loving. I am Grace Thompson. I am 60 years old. I donated my kidney to save my son, and he threw me out 2 years later. And yet I am still here. Broken but breathing. Wounded but not defeated. Betrayed but still, somehow, hopeful that one day, somewhere, the love I gave will mean something. Because that is what mothers do. We hope. Even when hope seems foolish. Even when the world gives us every reason to despair. We hope. And we love. Until the very end.